let's talk about this Evinrude. This is the after work garage. The other day when I was running it, I thought there might be a timing issue, but the more I messed with it, it seemed like it was running really lean. So as it warmed up just a little bit, it would like stumble and stall, and then if I applied more choke to it, it seemed to run a little better. So that's a classic symptom of running lean. Not a professional mechanic, so your guess is as good as mine, but I'm thinking it's probably a carburetor issue, since in these engines, well, it's old, and old carbureted engines need cleaning. So I'm going to take you along today as I clean out the carburetor in this Evinrude 9.5 Sport Twin, and then we're going to hopefully get it back on and give it a try and see how it runs. Probably one of the most important things you can get for an engine before you start taking it apart is the service manual. This service manual is for Johnson Evinrude's 1956 through 1970. So I'm going to take some time, go through here, look up. This is happens to be a Type 3 carburetor. Look up how to disassemble it and how to clean it. So I'm going to get to that. So the carburetor in this engine is right here. You have your choke, which is operated by the choke handle, which, by the way, the other day I tried to pull to start it, broke the faceplate off. And had to screw it back in. Not the most elegant solution, but it works. Anyways, it looks like the carb is held on by these bolts here to the engine, and then let's see, I see one more down here that links it to the throttle advance. So as you open the throttle up, you also adjust the carburetor. So we're gonna have to take apart all of those things and see what we got. Obviously, fuel line down here to the fuel pump. This looks like it's the fuel pump. The idle, used to be a knob here at some point that was the idle fuel adjustment knob. So let's take it off and we'll see what we can do. There's nothing like the feeling of grabbing the right socket and guessing the size. Of course, it never happens, but this was one of those rare times. Remember when I said there's nothing like picking the right socket right off the bat? I was wrong. I picked a 10 millimeter, and these are 3/8. And sometimes I get faked out because the next size up in a metric will often work on a standard socket, but they're just a little too big. So you risk stripping out the bolt head. The last screw is that one down there. So that's way down in there, and you have to move the throttle, otherwise there's a plate that's in the way. The spark advance is in the way. So you move open the throttle up, and there's the screw. We also apparently have to disconnect this flexible linkage here. Some models had a solid linkage, but it says that this model does not. So we're going to turn this counterclockwise to remove this screw here. So what I'm doing is turning this knob on the front, and it's turning that flexible linkage. And if we unscrew it all the way, we unscrew the needle there, the idle needle from the carburetor. I'm not pretending to be a carburetor expert, by the way. In fact, I should explicitly state I am not a carburetor expert. But I can manage my way through taking one apart and cleaning it and putting it back together the way I found it. Though whenever I say something like that, I have a way of proving myself wrong. Alright, this looks like it's ready to slide out here. Okay, so there's our idle needle. There we are. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's in terrible shape. We'll see. Alright, so now I'm going to attack that screw down there, the last 5th screw. It's a flathead. Just got a flathead on a extension here. And hopefully we can worm this all the way down there without having to remove the flywheel. Although it looks like I'm going to have to remove the flywheel. Alright, let's get a better look at that screw I was talking about. It is this screw right there. Something with teeth that can grip it. That's inconvenient. Okay, well, it's an older engine. We have a carburetor. Take this out so it's not flopping around. There is a C-clip there. I'm wondering if this can come off, or maybe that just retains everything. So I can clean this needle off of the motor. Oh. There we are. Just push it out. So here's what it looks like inside. Those are the reed valves in there. We can take a look. They don't look like they're in terrible shape. And while I'm not known for being the cleanest worker, I do want to put something over those. I'm just gonna I guess I'll just lay a glove over them. Over it, because I really don't want things falling into the engine. There. Now let's work on the carburetor. Alright, so we've got our carburetor here. Part of the delay in shooting this video is waiting on a kit. So I got a carburetor rebuild kit, which should have all of the parts, disposable parts, like gaskets and O-rings needed to rebuild this carburetor. Here's a picture of a rebuild kit. This looks similar. And I'm heavily referencing the repair manual for this one because, as you can see, it's a little complicated. And I want to make sure that each of the O-rings and gaskets go in the right position. But first, what we want to do is basically try to strip this down to just the metal so that we can clean out all of the little passages inside the metal that the fuel goes through with carb cleaner, which is really corrosive to plastic and rubber. So let's do that now. Looks like these two are longer than these. So they kind of go in this orientation. So now we see this is a cork fuel float. They kindly gave us a replacement, though I'm not sure it's needed in this case. Let's see if and that's when the fuel bowl, the carburetor bowl, which is here, is full of gasoline, which it is. The fuel float floats up and closes off the inlet to the bowl, so it doesn't keep pumping gas from the tank into this and overflow it. If that happens, it starts flooding the engine with too much gasoline. I'm going to get rid of this gas, and we'll take a look. Just looking at it, it doesn't look too bad. It's not sludgy or crappy, and there's not too much varnish or other nastiness in there. So this looks pretty clean. I mean, okay, it doesn't look that clean. That varnish in there needs to go. We'll get a chance to clean that out. With carburetors, again, I'm not an expert, but clean looking parts don't always mean they're actually that clean, because very, very small pieces of dirt can build up in passageways and on needle tips and cause problems with fuel flow, and they're very sensitive to little obstructions like that. So in this case, this is going to get a cleaning. The carburetor bowl not as critical as a lot of little passages in the top end. So let's go ahead and disassemble the top end and see what we have there. Here's what the top of this looks like. You have our fuel float here, which controls a little pin. As the fuel bowl fills up, it pushes that little pin in, seals off the fuel flow. I believe this is going to be our main jet there, which typically comes down in the middle, into the middle of the bowl. This pops off. We'll just get that out of the way. So we have our choke up top. So that's a fully choked position. And then when your engine warms up, it opens up. And behind it is the throttle body. Well, the whole thing is the throttle body, but behind that is the throttle, which is controlled here. And this is a cam follower. That big metal piece that was moving to adjust the spark advance also actually moves the throttle by having a ramp that this follows. And when the throttle's wide open, it looks like that. The hinge pin there just pushes out. We have our float, hinge pin, and the seal. This seals has a little rubber tip on it that, as I mentioned, seals gas coming in from the fuel pump. So gas comes from the fuel pump. It has to come in through this hole here. And when the fuel bowl, the carburetor bowl, is full, then this float comes up and that rubber tip seals up against the seat inside there. This rubber tip doesn't actually look bad. Looks like it's in pretty decent shape. If there's a big pronounced ridge along it from jamming up too hard, then fuel can leak into here, and that's obviously a problem. Hi guys, we're back. I'm going to keep taking apart this carburetor for cleaning. I've been doing a little reading in the manual, and it looks like the high-speed orifice, so the port that lets fuel through when the motor's running at a higher speed is located right behind this drain nut in the bowl section of the carburetor. So I'm going to take this out, and we're going to look at it and clean it. So fuel then goes through this bowl, down here, through the high-speed orifice, and then up right here through this little standpipe, which looks like it has the main jet in it, and up into the throttle body venturi. So let's take it apart and see what we got. Kind of hard to see, but there is indeed an orifice in there that looks like it can be removed with a small flathead screwdriver. Well, that's not exactly what you'd call clean, is it? Not clean at all. Okay, so for these plugs here, it looks like we have to punch them out somehow without damaging the metal behind them. So I'm going to work on that, and you will get to watch. Alright, so what we have in here is things that I don't understand, but I'm sure they're very important. There's little holes in there, some little holes over here. Oh, that's not a hole. It's just a piece of dirt. But there's at least 3 little holes in there. There's an orifice there. And basically, I'm just going to spray them all out. I'm also going to take out this seat here, just so we can clean behind it as well. So again, this is where the float needle comes up to stop the gas flow into the carburetor bowl when there's enough gas in there already. So there's a little plastic O-ring in there, and then a fuel passage behind it. And it looks like that goes up and out to the fuel barb, which makes sense. Alright, so carburetor cleaner is not the friendliest stuff. You don't want to get it all over you and breathe in too much. So I've cleaned out an oil pan here so that I'm not getting too much dirt back on my carburetors. And I'm going to wear a face shield just to prevent splashes in my eyes, because no one likes that. There are carb dips, but I didn't want to buy a big bucket and have it sitting around. They're kind of expensive, so I just went with some spray carburetor cleaner. So I mentioned it's not the best stuff. It's definitely dissolving the face shield and dissolved my gloves, so that's excellent. Alright, while we wait for this, I'm going to go over here and see what's in the new kit. I'm going to look in this new kit, look in the new parts, and try to kind of compare them to the old parts. Alright, so we have new gaskets. This gasket goes between the carburetor itself and the reed valves in the engine. This gasket looks like it's a perfect match. I don't know. I believe this is for a different style carburetor. Seems to be a cork float. This one, the new one's coated in a varnish that the old one wasn't. I wonder if that's to keep fuel out or to keep water out. I don't know. Interesting. They're about the same weight though. But in the light you can kind of see this one's varnished and this one isn't. Other than that, they look identical. This is a screen. Again, oh, these may be for the fuel pump. I don't know. Alright, we have a little tiny clip right here that I don't know what it does. This is the seat for the float valve. I'll be replacing that. Here's a needle, a float needle. It doesn't look like this one's covered with the same. Oh, I guess it has something on it. I think I'll just use the old one, because it looks like it's in good shape and looks like it's has a coating on it that this doesn't. This plastic O-ring here is the same as this plastic O-ring in there. And we have a bunch of O-rings. Alright, so it looks like there's two styles of this carburetor, and the one with the flexible shaft does not use all of these little O-rings. It just uses that big rubber one in there. As you can see, this rubber one there and this rubber one here are similar. We have replacement plugs. So this metal plug and this metal plug. And there's a small one there. A replacement gasket for the drain screw in the carburetor bowl. And this is a replacement pin that holds the float in place. Goes through here. let's take a look at these carburetors here. This one's I've left drying. You can see the holes in here, maybe or maybe not, are cleaner than they were before. You can see through 2 of them. Actually, you can see through all 3 of them. Let's see if I can get that on camera. This hole right there, this hole right here goes straight through to the Venturi. So I cleaned that out real nicely. Nothing I can do about this being a little rusted, and the corrosion here on that standpipe thing, which I thought was the main jet, but I don't think that anymore. But it looks as clean as it's gonna look, and I'll give it a shot. With the carburetor bowl with the high-speed orifice in it. I've been just soaking this in here just to see if I can get rid of some of that residue and gunk without having to hold on to it. And while that's sitting and soaking a little longer, I'm going to take a look at this thing. Just spray off the needle, clean it up a little bit. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. There is that ridge you can see there, but it's not as defined. It's not so defined that I'm terribly worried about it. Let's see if I can get a shot of this. I tried a different set of gloves and it still did not like them. So I guess I'm gonna double glove here to finish up so that it's melting my gloves at a slightly lower rate, I guess. There's some corrosion in there, but now the opening's actually open. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get, yeah, there we go, see? But on this side, on that bigger area, it looks like there's some corrosion on the inside. Actually, it looks like someone's poked in there with something and scraped up the sides. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that on camera. Back with the carburetor here. Things are dried out and should be relatively clean. So the first thing we're going to insert is this high-speed orifice that we took out and cleaned out. And that's going to go in the bottom section here. I'm going to install a drain plug with a new gasket. Before I put the float back on, I'm going to put these plugs back in because they require a little bit of pushing and pounding. So it looks like the way these work, because it's seated, but it's not pressed firm up against there, is that the convex side, you pound it down and it expands in to fill the space. This actually looks pretty good. This is the end of my 1/4 inch socket extension, and I'm going to use this to drive it in there. I'm going to do this on the ground so I don't mess everything up. So I've got that in, and hopefully it's sufficient to close off that orifice. I guess we will find out. That one was a little easier. You just hit it with the end and flatten right out. So with those installed, I'm going to install the new seat for the float needle. I'm not sure quite how tight to make this, but I'm going to just tighten it down until it just barely seats on the gasket there and compresses it a little bit. There we are. I don't want it to back out, but I also don't want to crunch it in there so tight that we're risking breaking things. Alright, that looks good. Next thing we're going to do is install the float. So we have this new float here. That's how it's going to sit. And our new pin that goes through it. I believe this small metal piece goes in and secures this pin in here. There wasn't one when I took it apart. I see. Next thing we're going to do is install this gasket. This just sits right here. And then we have our 2 long screws go in this side. And our 2 short screws that go in here. So that's convincingly back together. We'll try to reattach all of these linkages now. Well, brittle old plastic pieces in my heavy hand don't seem to go together. So while I've gotten it on, I've also ruined it. So this particular linkage here is so that when you pull the choke out, you open the throttle just a little bit. I'm wondering if I glue that in there. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to install this pin here. This is the idle fuel adjustment valve. We have our spring somewhere. Did I lose my spring? I just saw it. Here it is. Down here. We'll take the new O-ring. Oh my gosh. I can hardly tell which one's the new one and which one's the old one. Put it on. That's our setup there. Big washer, spring, little washer, and big O-ring. And this gets screwed in right here. Oh, also it says to add a small drop of oil to the outside of the O-ring to help it go in. So I'm going to grab a little bit of 2-stroke oil and just drop her a tiny bit on. So it's just a little bit of 2-stroke oil. Dip something in it and put a drop on there. So the manual says screw this all the way in until it just barely seats, and then back it out 1 1/2 turns as a starting point. So we've just barely seated it there, and then we're going to back it out 1 1/2 turns. 1 turn, 1/2 turn as a starting point. All right. back on. And then almost ready to put it back in the engine. I'm gonna go get some glue. I know. And throw it on this so that our linkage works for right now. And then I'll be right back with you. That's not a good sign. That's a mess. Not using that. Feel the judgment. He's super gluing it. Let's go to the motor. And let's go ahead and reinstall the carburetor. Take this guy off. Just old gasket. And it looks like this one. So we're doing well. There is stuff you can get that keeps gaskets in place. I just don't have any. Okay, so let's see if you can see this. Not very well. Turn it around. There is a follower right here that follows along as you increase the throttle, and this flange then moves that follower. This piece fits on the end of this and in turn contacts the follower to open the throttle. So the way this is seated, so it works like so. There's a little bit of a spline shaft in there. It's not exactly splined, it's like a compression thing. That this tapered screw goes into the end of and expands. Sorry about that. And opens up the splines to catch the inside of this piece. So I'm going to install that right now. And this is what, when you synchronize the motor, this is the where you do it. So before we do that, just to get a baseline set up here, I know with the throttle closed, which it is, this follower is going to sit where the throttle is at 0. Again, very rough. When you actually synchronize this, you have to look at when this shaft starts to first move. So now you can see it's grabbing and starting to move together. So as you increase the throttle, it opens the Oh, this is a magnet, by the way, so the magnet moving past these coils is what induces the current. So make sure you don't have any weird metal pieces stuck to it, because that can happen. I also bought new fuel line, since the old one was absolutely falling apart. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on. Slip these fittings on. Little compression clamps. I don't like these, but they're here, and I don't have any hose clamps because I'm cheap and I didn't want to buy the hose clamps. Little tiny hose clamps for this motor. There we go. Today we're going to try out the Evinrude 9.5 that we've been working on. Currently we're at the convergence of the Kansas and Missouri rivers. This is historic Caw Point, and what it lacks in beauty, it certainly makes up for in brown muddiness. But regardless, we're gonna give this a shot and see if our carburetor rebuild worked and if the motor runs. Let's give it a shot. Probably help if we're in neutral. Oh, listen to that. Seems to be running okay. Let's bring you over here. Spitting out water, as you can see. Oops. Moving. And more importantly, we're shifting, so it doesn't look like we're going to have to take apart the lower unit with luck. All right. Let's give this a shot. It seems to be running okay. Hopefully there's not too much vibration through the camera there. Look at that. That's pretty. Got water coming out of the telltale. I haven't replaced the impeller yet. I wanted to make sure the motor was running before I did that. But it looks like it is. And it seems to be running okay, actually. Open it up a little bit more here. We're wide open right now. It looks like we're going about 15.8 miles an hour, 16 miles an hour, heading into the river, big river. I'm going to pull up into this little more sheltered area by the Kansas River and bring it back to idle and see how it's idling. So let's back it off to idle and we'll see how it's running, see how the idle adjustment seems. Alright, it looks like I have to give it a little bit of gas or else it dies out. maybe if I put it in neutral, I can, all right, it's in neutral right now. The throttle's backed all the way off, and it seems to be doing pretty well, actually. I'm surprised. This thing idles real nicely. Once I got it started and warmed up, I think a little bit of the hesitation getting started is because it's cold, and as we saw, the compression was a little bit low. Once it got warmed up, it seems to be running pretty well. So after running a little bit, I pulled the spark plugs out, and this is what they look like. I'm not a spark plug expert, but they look pretty good to me. They've got that nice brown color to them. They don't look very oily, and they don't look worn down from arcing or anything. Two-strokes are notorious for fouling the plugs because of the oil that's burned in them. These don't look like they're anywhere near that, so it looks pretty good. I'm happy. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think cleaning out that really gunked up main jet in the carburetor did the trick to getting it running smoothly. In fact, this motor is extremely smooth for a two-stroke, and it's going to become the main motor on the aluminum boat that I use in the river. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time on the After Work Garage.